Mold exposure and mold toxicity is another very difficult diagnosis to pin down. A lot of people will start to notice that their health starts to deteriorate, usually after either moving into a new home or after having some kind of flooding occur in the house or leakage in the ceiling, something of that nature. The reason it can be very difficult to detect is that unless the mold is overtly apparent somewhere, like you actively see black mold in the corner of a room or on the wall, you're not going to know necessarily that it's there. It can be inside the drywall, it can be above your ceiling, it can be underneath your carpet, it can be places where you're usually not looking. So the biggest things that we see with a lot of mold toxicity and mold exposure is going to be massive fatigue. Some people get urinary frequency, a lot of brain fog. People develop some sinus issues, a lot of congestion, postnasal drip, insomnia can certainly occur as well. On labs, generally speaking, we tend to see testosterone levels start to decrease and the estrogens start to increase. Aromatase activity in particular is affected by mold, so we start to see that conversion start to occur away from testosterone production. The most difficult parts are really just, again, kind of coming in with the actual interview with the patient, taking that case on, really pinpointing, okay, what's the timeline of when this started? Did anything change? Do we have particularly heavy rains? How old is the home? All of those things are going to have an effect. Or are you being exposed at work? I've had a lot of mold patients that have had major exposure to mold and in the workplace. And a lot of these patients are also very sensitive to like any kind of a mildew or damp smell after a while as well. But we really have to delve into a combination of blood testing and urine testing to see if there are mycotoxins in the urine, or indirectly if there's anything in the blood that's being affected by mycotoxins. And so mycotoxins are going to be the breakdown of mold spore components. Mold spores are incredibly tiny. So they can be permeating through surfaces you wouldn't normally expect. And they can be all over the place without you actively visibly seeing mold like visibly growing somewhere. One of the first steps we do if we really have a strong inkling as to, okay, this is likely mold, we go into the testing. Once we get those testing results back, then we need to find out where it's coming from. Where is the exposure occurring? So we do more advanced testing for the home or the workplace, wherever the most high chance there is of some kind of exposure. We need to make sure that there's some kind of either remediation or the patient needs to move away from that environment completely. Once they're out of the environment, then we're able to really get in and treat. And part of treating is really going to be increasing detoxification pathways. So really helping to support the liver, making sure we're binding up a lot of these mold spores and pulling them out of circulation. Rechecking labs periodically to see, okay, has the exposure come down from here to here to here? And the amount of time it's going to take is going to be highly dependent on how quickly they get out of the environment that caused the issue in the first place, how compliant they are with treatment, certainly. But that is certainly a very curable ailment. We just need to identify it. And that's one of the most difficult parts as well. A lot of people end up using mold kits they find at Home Depot, or they bring in people who are counting mold spores under a microscope, things like that are very inaccurate ways of measuring it. So we really encourage people to use ERMI testing, or Environmental Relative Moldiness Index testing, which is a far more robust method for detection, because it's taking into account the DNA of all of these different types of mold in the environment. And so once we're able to see that, we have definitive proof in the environment and through blood testing, then we really get into helping somebody detox from it.
More coverage of Hurricane Irene, which has not only caused damage in the Susquehanna Valley, but for some it can cause health issues. In the aftermath of Irene, mold is a possibility for many homes because that's a serious threat to your health. News 8 asked an expert what you can do today to keep mold away. With more on that, here's Dauphin County reporter Portia Johnson.
I see many pieces of debris.
Curiosity always has May Dooley looking for answers, and right now she is looking for mold.
So we have a very low level of mold here.
Dooley is a scientist by trade, and she says it's common to find green mold in your basement after a storm, especially if your basement is finished.
And hurricane comes along and the water comes in and you have some wetness at the bottom of the drywall or the paneling. Then you have to cut off that, open it up, dry it out, and reconstruct. This is one reason why it's such an advantage to have an unfinished basement.
But an unfinished basement doesn't mean you're mold-free.
You follow the path of the water.
Dooley says the big sign that your basement could have mold growing is discolored spots on the wall or floor.
Many people think that concrete wall is waterproof, and it's not. It's porous. It lets moisture come through.
Aside from moisture, Dooley says a musty smell in the basement or severe headaches and respiratory issues could also be a sign of mold. How do you outsmart the mold?
Well, one way is to protect surfaces. Anything that's vulnerable, such as a cardboard box, I have put in a plastic bag to protect it from mold, but even better, put items in these plastic bins, because mold doesn't like plastic. Mold likes wood. So what do you do with the surfaces that are wood, such as these steps? You put in a sealant on them.
And if you follow those steps, she says the mold should leave your home alone. In Dauphin County, Portia Johnson, News 8.
And Dooley tells us that most homeowner insurance policies do not cover mold removal, so catching it before it grows is key.
A local woman says she's dealing with mold at her apartment. She's trying to get help. She says it's impacting her health. Here's News Channel 6's Renetta Dubose.
I'm still constantly finding stuff as I'm moving things around.
Brianna Parker relocated to Icon Waverly Apartments complex off Skinner Mill Road in Augusta back in April. And at first glance, it was a nice place for her to live.
See, my first bathroom is black all up beside my bathtub. In my main master bathroom, it's a black circle next to my toilet in my bathtub.
Shortly after moving into her new home, she found mold. Parker shares these photos of what she says is mold in her laundry room, too.
My whole door is corroded. It's completely splitting in half, and it also is, falling off the hinges because the hinges are rusty and have mold on it.
Parker says she put in work orders months ago, but the problem is still present. It's one that she says is now taking a toll on her health, having lupus and asthma.
It's actual mold in my lungs now, and it's on the paper and documents that it's mold in my lungs.
What brought you to go to the doctor?
Because my chest was tight every time I wake up. My heart is constantly racing. It don't feel right.
We reported in 2016 that the city's planning and development director told us people in apartments should get a renter's insurance policy and make sure that it covers their contents. Code enforcement stressed back then that people should contact their apartment's property manager first with complaints, then them. While Parker wears a mask inside her home to avoid the tightening in her chest and a racing heart, she also contacted a lawyer, a right that many renters have once they have taken the proper documentation of the problem.
He said this is a big case. He said this is something serious.
We reached out to Parker's lawyer and the Icon Waverly, but did not hear back at the time of this story. In Augusta, Renette Dubose, WJBF News Channel 6.
Rats, mold, and broken appliances. That is how one mother described her living conditions at a North Houston apartment complex. The woman is running into roadblocks now when it comes to getting issues resolved and finding a new place to live. She reached out to KPRC2 for help and spoke exclusively to our Rochelle Turner. And Rochelle joining us now from the Cranbrook Forest Apartments on Ella Boulevard with her story. Rochelle?
Daniela, Ms. Roselle has lived at this complex behind me a little over a year and says rats have taken over her apartment. It's gotten so bad that after she drops her son off at school, she actually stays in her car, and her son recently got sick because of mold. Today, I spoke to an attorney from Lone Star Legal Aid, and they provided helpful tips for tenant rights.
This is the mold right here.
This is what Ms. Roselle's bathroom looks like at the Cranbrook Forest Apartments in North Houston. The mother is also dealing with mice and rats in her kitchen and bedroom.
It's kind of like starting to mentally mess me up. Like, honestly, because anything fall, I be jumping, I be looking.
Roselle says she submitted work orders to management.
Next day or so, they'll come back saying it's completed and submitted, and nothing never happened.
She receives help from the Houston Housing Authority and says the agency stopped paying her rent because the complex failed inspections. It left her with a balance.
I feel like I shouldn't have to pay it.
I spoke to a staff attorney with Lone Star Legal Aid who says the situation can be tough on tenants.
The housing authority will not be paying out the rent anymore, and the tenant will most certainly lose the apartment without the ability to make that rent.
When it comes to work orders not being completed, Treble recommends sending a certified letter to management and give them time to respond. If that doesn't work, a tenant can fix the problem on their own or sue management in small claims court.
I really think that it takes tenants being really proactive, and go ahead and get in a request to the housing authority. Don't wait around for that property to fail.
There's nothing further I can give you any commentary.
I went to the front office and management wouldn't answer any questions. Roselle says she's had enough and she hopes she can move out soon.
I moved to Houston, kind of relocated thinking like I can get myself together, but this have kind of like brought me down. I barely can sleep at night.
And Lone Star Legal Aid did provide a number for tenants that need help. Their number is on your screen, 713-652-0077. You can call them and they will start the process of getting you some help. I did reach out to management through email, but I have not heard back as of news time. Reporting live from North Houston, I'm Rochelle Turner, KPRC 2 News.
Hope there's a
A North Las Vegas family's fight to live in safer environment continues. It's an update to a story that we first brought you here last week, showing black mold issue at the Rose Garden townhomes. Victoria Saha went back there today only to find that management has not lived up to their promise they told us last week.
Denise, we went back there today because Shaquia Armstrong, one of the many residents living in these unsafe conditions, was supposed to check out of the hotel that management put her in while they claimed they were fixing the mold issue. So we went back there to see if there was any progress. Shaquia Armstrong was supposed to be moving into her new temporary unit at Rose Garden.
I found the same exact thing that was in my unit. Mold.
So instead, everything is being unloaded from the moving truck back into her old unit.
They're all molded, they're all infested, they're all leaking, plumbing issues, air vent issues.
Management put Armstrong in a hotel from May 5th until May 9th so they can fix the black mold issue in her old unit. But as we went to inspect, there was no sign of any work done.
Asbestos still all in the wall, up and down. Mold all around the outside. Nothing's changed.
While we were out there, several residents surrounded us to tell us their horrific living condition. When we first reported the story last week, Fairstead, a company out of New York that owns the complex, said they expected all mold to be removed this week. They also said they put a regional manager and a facilities manager on site full-time to address this. So we went to the leasing office to ask why Armstrong still does not have a mold-free apartment. Are you guys going to give her a new unit?
No comment, ma'am.
Or why was it okay for her to be put in a unit with mold again? This was a situation she was trying to avoid. Staff refused to answer. I was told there's a full-time regional facilities manager and a manager on site to discuss this for residents.
Never.
That was a resident nearby who also says she's been dealing with this for years. We were told there's a regional facilities manager as well on site, full-time, to discuss these issues.
On our site? Who told you that?
New York and New York office, Fairstead.
It's just us here. Something has to give. We can't keep staying here. We can't keep doing this.
I've been in contact with the Fairstead company. They told me they would have an update on the work being done. I reached out again after visiting the complex, asking for that update and sharing that we didn't find a facilities manager on site like they promised. I'm still waiting for them to explain themselves. As for Armstrong, she has to go back to the hotel for the next few days. Denise?